As the sky does pinken, it is 22 degrees Celsius, 72 degrees Fahrenheit here in the Sabi Sand, part of the Greater Kruger National Park, South Africa. That's where we sit now. My name is James Henry. Hello. Yes, that's me. And on camera today we have Sebastian Rombi. There he is. He's a vast human being, as you can see from the size of his hand. The other vehicle, well, is not out today. We have got Ralph now on his size 10s or so, wandering the wilderness with Herbert Korza and Wiem. Very lucky, a brief glimpse of her cubs. We don't know how many there are. We do know, however, that she has a den site. We have seen her going into a termite mound. We've seen her licking something at the base of the termite mound. Unless she's become a termite-eating leopard, it is highly unlikely that there is any other conclusion to draw other than that she has cubs over there. So that's our plan today. It is, what was I going to tell you now? I think I had something else of vital importance to tell you. Oh, yes. Please do talk to us for the course of the show. Hashtag Safari Live on Twitter, and then of course you can use the chat stream on the YouTube broadcast to get hold of us. Let us see what we find today. This is my first drive for a very long time. I'm not sure I'll recognize a leopard if I see it from the car. We'll keep an eye out for tracks on the road. The old cliche of the bush newspaper. Of course, nobody reads newspapers anymore. So perhaps we need a new cliche. There's a lovely dawn chorus today. We've got some sunbirds calling up in that tree over there. And a lovely white-browed scrub robin going. We've got an orange-breasted bush shrike. It's probably a white-bellied sunbird. I can hear that swizzling call. Some Egyptian geese having a fight in the distance. Emerald spotted wood dove. Observing life. They always look a little bit startled, I feel, the doves. In amongst the sounds of the birds, I thought
Ralph Kirsten, and you with Safari Live. Please join us on hashtag Safari Live on Twitter and on the Facebook page. Please join us as we enjoy the dawn chorus and we look at the newspaper part of the tracks and signs that we find out here in the bush. We've got up this morning and we've enjoyed a lovely sunrise, and as the sun was coming up this morning, we were hearing a whole cacophony of birds calling, and we found a lot of tracks on the road, and we saw some lion tracks as we headed out. It seems like it was a male that headed out of the concession, so we continued along the road, and we started to pick up on all sorts of tracks and signs. We've got impala impala, and we've got some genet, and we've got all the little insects and things moving around. So this is, for me, the most amazing part of being in the bush, is getting close to the ground, starting to see what has happened through the night, and reading the newspaper of the bush. That really is the most amazing part of being in the bush, that you can get away from the vehicle, being on the ground and seeing and smelling and hearing all that sights and sounds and smells of the bush. We're really becoming part of it here, and this for me is the most amazing part of being in the bush. Now we're going to continue along the road here, and as we then find some tracks, we will then move off and try and see if we can pick up, hopefully, on some leopard tracks, and if we can, then we will trail it and see if we can follow up and find it. But we always see then, as we move along, we'll listen out. We've got some impala that were watching us. They're very attentive. There's some monkeys in the tree. We listen out for them, because they're the first ones that pick up if there's any predators around. We're also starting to see some birds that are getting up into flight, and they're also starting to indicate to us what is going on in the first part of the morning. So, the predators, obviously like the hyenas and the lions and the leopards, they would have been very active during the evening. It was very hot yesterday, so as it cooled down into the dark of the night, that was when the predators became very active. So as we start to move now, this is when they start to actually go down with their activity, and we might actually be able to catch up with them. However, I think that lion has moved off out of the concession, as I said, but as we move along now, we might be able to pick up on some of these predators and be able to actually find them, because when they're very active during the night, obviously we wouldn't be walking around during the night, because predators are a totally different beast in the dark, so we wouldn't be walking looking for them then. That would only be on a vehicle. But with us walking now in the early part of the morning, we've got a very good chance of picking up on that. But as we walk along, we're also going to be looking for all sorts of different tracks and signs, and as I've said, that is one of my most favorite part of the bush, and I want to actually give you a little bit of the basics of tracking this morning, and then we can start to look at the different predators we go from the cats to the dog-like animals. We start to look at mongoose, we look at invertebrates, we look at bird tracks, and we're really going to try and get to the nitty-gritties of all these different tracks and signs that have been left, and the newspaper of the bush. You guys get up in the morning right now, wherever you are in the world, you might be having your morning coffee. Well, we have our morning coffee, and when you are reading your newspaper, well, we read the tracks and signs on the ground and what has been moving around. That is our newspaper. We see what happened during the night, and we see then if we can follow up on them. It's a lovely 22 degrees centigrade, 72 degrees Fahrenheit, so it's nice and cool for us to move, and the predators, they can still be a little bit active, and as I said, those predators being a little bit active, the impala, they will let us know if anything is moving around, and we've got our tracker with us. He's also going to be looking for things, Herbert, and we've got VM on the camera, but I am going to try my best now. As we move along, we're going to continue looking for all of these tracks and signs, and I'm going to do my best to see what we can find amazing for this bushwalk. Right, I think we're going to cross now to James. I think he might have something to show you.
I do have something to show you. There is a Niala. A female Niala. And we're in the vicinity of Tundi's den as far as I can tell, but as you can see, that Niala looks at peace and does not have a leopard attached to her backside or her throat. It is not to say that Tundi couldn't be stalking her somewhere near here. There's another Niala behind. They always look a little bit scruffy when they're young. They are prone to a bit of mange now and then, but I don't think that one's got mange. I just think it's got bed hair. There's one just behind that one, Seb, with bed hair. Seb, I used to get bed hair when I had hair. something I look back on with fondness in my life. None of these, of course, we saw in the Mara. They do not occur there. They're only, well, they have two relatives, one bigger, one smaller there. The bushbuck being the smallest one and the eland being the larger one. And it's very nice to see them again. We've got an impala running there. We've got some shouting rollers above us. Ooh. What is that? I thought so. It is a ground-scraping thrush. Or ground-scraper thrush. That's it. If you just zoom straight in the middle of your screen there, you'll get him. There it is. Now, as far as I can tell, this roller is just having a territorial dispute. Or perhaps a courtship dispute. Isn't that... I don't know if you can hear it. It's going... Just checking out the morning. Enjoying the rising sun. Very pleasant. Well, two of them flying off. There they go. Okay, the Nialas have moved into some thicker bush. Let us continue our great quest. We have not as yet found any sign of Tundi, but that's okay for now. For those of you who are new viewers, Tundi is an 11-year-old leopardess who lives in this area. Just had 2 cubs. Now, Theodore, you're wondering about my last sighting of wild dogs. I can't remember. It was so far in the dim recesses of the misty past. There are the Nyala again. Let's have another look at them. But Theodore, they were seen here at Djuma about 2 days ago. Tristan had them. Unfortunately, there was no signal where he was. And so we didn't see them live, but they were there. There's a baby Nyala in there, just Tundi sized. So I wouldn't be hanging around here if I was a Nyala. They're just beginning to be touched by the rays of the rising sun, or the risen sun. And I think this very soft golden light that we have now is very soon going to change to quite white light. There is no cloud in the sky, and I think we're staring down the barrel of a very hot, low-felt day. Now, it's always a good idea just to stop and watch a few things. If you're in the vicinity of the predator you're hoping to find, you might hear some alarm calls. And it's very difficult to hear alarm calls, of course, above the sound of the engine, as quiet as this engine is. And of course, that lovely sound of summer way in the background, that red-chested cuckoo. Doesn't it all look so peaceful? This, of course, is one of the major reasons to work out here, as far as I'm concerned. Yes, it's nice to see lions and leopards and tremendous birds soaring in the sky and listen to the birds calling, but it is the peace that all of that sort of fills one with in the morning versus the sort of opposite that you'd get in the traffic, for example, in the city. A major reason to live in a place like this. All right, Sebastian, let us continue. Let us go back along the road and see what else we can find. We did have some nice fresh elephant tracks, well, from yesterday evening. Oh, did I say Tundi has 2 cubs? That if I did, I have no idea if Tundi has 2 or 3 cubs or 24 cubs. It's unlikely she's got 24. It's most likely 2 or 3, but I don't know how many. Nobody's seen them yet. So it could be any number. We will tell you, I promise, if and when we see them. There's another Niala lurking in the bushes there. Here we have some arrow-marked babblers. There we are. Ooh, we've got a little sparrowhawk, I think, as well. You see it there?
Yeah.
That's special. No, I don't think it's a little sparrowhawk. I think it's a little shikra. That is fantastic. You don't often get a view of these birds like that. Seb, I'm just going to press the clutch and see if we can't roll. Oh, no, there we go. No, you've got a beautiful view.
Oh.
Up top there? Same tree,
okay.
Right in the open. Now what you're looking for there is the colour of the feet, of course, which is slightly yellow, but mostly with this bird the identifier is those bright ruby eyes. And I wonder if that's not what those babblers are having a shout at. This is a really gorgeous, gorgeous shot of this bird. It's not often that you'll be able, that it'll sit still for long enough. I'll just find you a picture. Oh, he's got an itchy chin. Isn't that remarkable? That is fantastic. He seems to only want to stand on one foot. What a magnificent little bird. He's only about, well, he's only about 20 centimeters long, I think, maybe a little bit longer, almost a foot. Almost 30 centimeters long. Yeah, see, the book says he's supposed to be 30 centimeters, 30 to 34. Those red eyes are very distinctive. So he belongs to a group of birds called the accipiters, and they're hawks basically, so they largely hawk other birds out of the sky or grab them as they take off out of branches, and they're often quite difficult to separate from each other, especially in flight. Quite similar sizes to the naked eye. There he goes. Oh, that's great. That is fantastic. But like I say, the yellow feet and red eye are what give him away. He also is very similar size to the Gabar goshawk. And the Gabar goshawk is very distinctive in flight by that, or distinguished in flight very obviously by that white rump that you can see over there. There it is. And there's the shikra in flight. And there you can see very red eyes. Almost identical to what we've just seen. Okay, marvellous. We're having a very good birding morning. Not a very good leopard morning so far, but we're having a very good birding morning. Ah, Snazzy, before we drive off, let me quickly show you the answer to this. You say, are there any ugly birds in South Africa? Yes, there is at least one extremely ugly bird in South Africa, and in fact you find him, or various versions of him, throughout much of the old world. And in India they have got two species of this tremendously ugly bird. Let me find him for you quickly. Oh, where is he? You think by now, after goodness knows how long looking at this book, I will just be able to open it to the right page. There he is. His name is the marabou stork. He is unquestionably an ugly bird. It is very difficult to find beauty in that. And his youngster is even worse. His youngster looks like a sort of a mixture between a tramp and a granny who has not eaten for many years. Sort of from the 16th century, you know, like a hardened, wizened old woman. There we are, the marabou stork. That, as far as I'm concerned, is the only ugly bird out here. I think the rest of them are pretty good looking, really. Now, I believe we are going to go all the way to the Maasai Mara now. Jamie Patterson is out. She is looking. Also, very luckily for you, at another sunrise.
A crisp, beautiful dawn out here in the Maasai Mara, and you have just jumped countries from the low veld of South Africa to the Maasai Mara in Kenya. And I'm right at the top of the hill, which is usually where we sort of skip through and we race down to the bottom because our signal tends to be patchy. But I just had to show you the sunrise this morning because it is utterly, utterly stunning. Good morning to all of you. My name is Jamie, and this morning Craig is on camera with me, and we are heading down into the plains of the Maasai Mara so that we can try and figure out, well, I don't actually know what my plan is. I was trying to think if I could tell you what my plan is, but I don't know at the moment. Somewhat curtailed by the fact that yesterday I did a lot of driving, and now I have no diesel. So a short round trip this morning. But let's go and see what awaits us down at the bottom. Just a quick look, because yesterday they were not flying. I'm very happy to see the hot air balloon is out and about on this lovely morning. I'm hoping that means it's going to be nice and still because it's been too windy for them to fly. Okay, as we head down to where that balloon is to see what awaits us, let's send you back across to South Africa. Now, I'm not quite sure exactly who I'm sending you to because I can't hear Kirsty. I think it's Ralph. Let's go and find out what he has to say.
Okay, folks, I just wanted to, like I said before when you were with me, I just want to give you a little bit of basics on tracking. Now, why I find tracking so amazing is that, for one thing, it is the earliest form of science. Now, what is science? It is literally, in a nutshell, a provable theory. Now, some of the first forms of humans, what were they doing when they were walking around? They were looking for game to eat. Obviously, that was how they would have survived. So, and the first and foremost way of being able to find an animal would be to pick up on a track, identify what that track is, follow it, and find it. So, ultimately, that is looking at a theory. We're looking at the ground. We're saying, right, that is an impala track. We're looking at the track itself. We don't see the animal. So in essence, it is literally a theory that we have an impala that has walked past a specific area, and we're then going to take and follow that theory and prove it at the end. So that is, in essence, the earliest form of science. Now, the basics of tracking, if we had to look at the different foot structures of animals, which is where we would start, because that is what registers on the ground. As we walk along, like we would, with our feet, okay, that is what registers on the ground, for instance, okay? So that is a track. Right, but coming out, just having a look here, if there's three different forms of hands or feet, okay, we've got plantigrade, which is like, okay, that is a registered track, okay, but the whole hand or the whole foot, that is your plantigrade tracks. Then we talk about digitigrade, which is just the fingers or the toes putting down onto the ground, okay, and that would be your cat-like animals or your dog-like animals. So that's quite easy to pick up then. Then we move on to the anguligrade, and that is where just the tips of the toes will be registering into the ground. So those are the three types we get. We get plantigrade, digitigrade, anguligrade. Anguligrade obviously being all your antelope and animals that are only putting right on the tips of their toes. So those are the ones that, if you ever did athletics at school, the coach would always tell you to run on the tips of your toes. This is the reason why they are so fast, because they're running on the tips of their toes. Their whole foot is literally raised up in the air. And we actually think where their knee is, that is actually where their ankle is. And where we think their hip is actually where their elbow or their elbow or their knee is, and their hip sitting right up where we actually can't even see. But that is the mistake that often people make, is they think that their foot is on the ground. They are literally walking on the tips of their toes, on the little pieces of those hooves. So that is giving them an obvious, very big adaptation to running on the ground and moving away from predators. They do need to be able to move pretty fast. So, and that is definitely from evasion of predators. So, folks, for me, that is the real basics of tracking. And as we move along, we're going to walk on a little bit here. I'm going to try and find us some nice tracks when we come back, because I really want to show you some fascinating stories and things that I do have for you. We've been following a little bit on the lion tracks, as I said, but it seems that they've moved on out of the concession. We now have heard something that is possibly a leopard nearby. So we're gonna move on, and we're gonna see if we can pick up on those leopard tracks. We've had a lot of little invertebrate tracks. It's nice and fresh and clear on the ground. So we're looking for all these little tracks and signs and tails. And the theory that that animal is there, we're gonna follow up on that and see if we can prove the theory of what we've been looking for. So we're going to continue on a little bit here, and we see what we can find. In the meantime, we've had some squirrels crawling up in the trees, and they also just probably calling to each other, trying to see, establishing their little territories once again. The birds have started to call. The night birds have stopped calling. You know that good Lord deliver us of the fiery-necked nightjar. We were hearing the little scops owlet that was calling every 5 seconds. You know how they do that? And we were hearing the barred owlet. And we also did last night, we heard the barn owls. So they've all started to go quiet, and now we're starting to hear those daytime birds coming alive. You know, bird calls, birds generally call in the early morning and the late afternoon. And the reason for this is, in the heat of the day, it's actually the air temperature starts to heat up, and it doesn't make sense for energy conservation to be calling in the middle of the day. If there's a little bit of air movement as well, your voice doesn't carry. So the best energy efficient way of getting your voice out is to call in the early morning or the late afternoon. That's obviously if you're a day bird. If you're an evening bird, it generally travels large distances anyway. So we're just going to start out here on the road, and we can just see, we normally don't walk on the road, but it's, you know, animals, they do also use the path of least resistance. So we'll also have a look on the road, and we can see what we can find. Over here we've got a nice coloured, not coloured, but the track has been nice and put out with the light coming over here. Nice and easy track. It's rounded, only one toe with that little frog in the back. This is a zebra track. Very easy to note, with one toe, very similar to that of your horses or donkeys. And as we move on a little bit here, we can have a look. This here, very square-like box track. This is of your warthog. So he's got 2 toes. Remember what I said? It's either plantigrade, digitigrade, or anguligrade. Both the zebra and this track being anguligrade, right on the tips of their toes. The zebra has only got 1 toe, but the warthog has got 2 toes. So that one is quite interesting. As we move on a little bit further here, we can have a look at these tracks over here. And this, it's obviously 2 toes as well, but also anguligrade. So right on the tips of the toe. This here being that of an impala. looking a little bit further here. This is a little ant heap, and that's been created by the ants. It's almost like their little rubbish dump over there. So I'm going to continue looking for all these tracks, and if we find something very nice for you, I'm going to bring you back, and in the meantime we can cross over to Jamie in the Mara.
Oh, I hear that you've been looking at some zebra tracks with Rolf. Well, we thought we'd show you some zebra. Seem to tie in quite nicely, and of course we always have several herds of them at the bottom of our escarpment road. I know that it is baby season in Djuma. It's baby season in the Mara as well. And every time I see a zebra herd, I stop and I look to see if I can see any kind of strange behavior from any of the females, just in case we get to see a live birth on our safaris. It's always a special thing. It doesn't often happen, but when it does, it is truly... Oh, Craig, look at these two. Sorry, the little topi on the left. Oh, goodness, are we fighting? Look, Kirst. It's Jamie and Kirsty round two. With a bystander. And his little baby topi. They've just started to grow their horns, talking about baby season. This is the lightweight match. They've just started to grow their horns, and already that instinct is kicking in as to just how they're meant to use them. Little baby topi are so entertaining, because they are full of energy. Most baby animals are, but baby topi in particular, especially first thing in the morning. I think they're just so thrilled they survived the night and the terrors of the night that they are bundles of joy. Look, here comes another one. Look at it, they're coming in from the left. Bounce, 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 bounce. Whoa, change of direction. You cannot tell me that's not gleeful. Reveling in the strength of those little legs. One day they will grow up to be big and strong like the adult on the left and the right, and actually all around us, and essentially become the fastest antelope in Africa. We always talk about that in the Sabi. That's because essentially Topi and Sabi are the same, and Topi is the East African version. So very, very, very fast, very strong in terms of stamina as well. Sweet. I wish they hadn't all gone dashing off over the hill. It was so cute. Okay, what was I talking about again? Oh yes, live births. And I've nearly seen one zebra who I'm sure was just about to give birth, but she disappeared off into the trees. Oh, I didn't do it. They've started growing their horns. Are there any more babies around here? No. That was the last of the baby topis, I think. Oh, hold on, they're just peeping out over the ridge. So I didn't do it. They have started growing their horns. I noticed it yesterday. Tiny, tiny little spikes on the tops of their heads. Come here, show us your head. Yes, I know you've got an itchy ear. No. They're shy, they're all embarrassed. These new things on the tops of their heads. Oh, come on, you lot. Come this way. They are very far away. Okay, admittedly the one that I decided to show you hasn't started growing its horns yet, but the older ones have. I noticed it a few days ago. So it's taken them about a month and a half, and already the horns have broken through the skin. So that is solid bone that is growing up through the tops of their heads. I always wonder if it's a bit like teething for them. Of course, one day they'll have grown to that sort of size and shape, if they're females, a little bit larger if they're males. But I always wonder if it gets itchy, especially when it breaks through the skin. It must do. It must be quite an uncomfortable thing. There, you can just see the tips there, or you could, before the other topi, whoa, little panic, walked in front of them. I'm sure it must be like teething. Okay. Right, since our little baby topis have decided that their game might be best played where we can't see it, I think let's carry on. I would love to go and find the Angamas. I haven't spent much time with them since I've got back, and I still haven't found the sausage tree pride. It's getting to be ridiculous because I've looked almost every day. I've looked for them. Well, the little biting midges have come out after the rain. Now, the one thing we are very happy, we might have to contend with biting, but in the Mara we very seldom have to contend with flat tyres. The same cannot be said for the folks back on Djuma, but luckily James is most experienced in tyre changing and has changed his in record-breaking time.
Indeed, the experience I have at tyre changing is not because I have been mechanically trained or anything of that nature. It is because I'm so incompetent at not popping tyres and getting stuck. So yes, I have great experience with the high lift jack, and you will be pleased to know that our tyre has been replaced and is now, well, hard. Good. We just came down to this pan over here to have a look and see if there wasn't some sign of leopard, but I haven't seen anything here. So we're going to pop down towards Twin Dams now and see if we can't find some sign there. That is, of course, at the end of this road. It's already starting to smell hot. I don't know if you know what I mean by that, but the air becomes, well, it starts to smell like burning, basically. It smells like burning air. I don't know if anyone knows what I mean by that, but you know that it's going to be a hot day when that happens. Yes, and it's not even 6 o'clock yet, as you say, Sebastian. Sebastian has told you that for two reasons. The first, of course, is to show you how amazingly hot it's going to be, and secondly, to show you how early it is that he and I came to work. All for the cause of the wilderness and bringing you the wilderness. But in summer you really do want to be up at that time of the day, otherwise it feels like the day's got away from you. There are two lurfing doves on the road. I have seen no further on the road. I have seen no further. There is a woodland kingfisher. Sorry about the picture loss. We are, I think, going to go through a slightly difficult area. Very silent.
Okay, folks, I just want to cut over here with VM. I want to show you something on these trees. So come with me as we walk along over here. Now, these little trees over here, these are called the silver cluster leaf. I'm sure a lot of you already know them, but I'm just looking for something in particular that we actually find on these trees. As VM comes along with me, I'm sure we will find some of these little things that I'm looking for over here. All right. Yes, I found them. Okay. If we can have a look up here, VM. See here? Okay, these are actually slightly different to the ones that I have, what I had in mind to show you, okay? Because what happens on this silver cluster leaf, this Terminalia sericea, very often there's a little wasp that we call a gall wasp. What he does is he actually stings the branches with a growth hormone, and then that the plant then actually grows a big gall, and then what happens is it makes a lovely place for the wasp to make a nest on the inside, and the little larvae then have a fantastic place to grow up inside there. But that is absolutely amazing how they sting these trees with that growth hormone, and then for that little nesting place of theirs. But these actually seem like these are different wasps altogether. They've actually grown their or built their little nests on the outside. But these trees very indicative of sodic sites, especially when you have them growing in abundance in a particular area. It means that the soil is quite salty, and usually with quite a lot of mineral salts in the soil. It's normally in an area where you've had a bit of a drainage point, a little bit of seep lines where water has been coming out onto the surface, and then in that area, obviously when water comes into an area and it then is exposed and evaporates, all the mineral elements are usually concentrated on that spot, because with the water being evaporated, then everything left behind. Now, we call these plants also the what is the word I'm looking for? Bubble gum or chewing gum of the bush. And when I was training students to be guides, we used to always trick them, because we say that this is the chewing gum of the bush, but if you chew it, it's very much like a purgative. It dries your mouth out completely. And I was chatting about this the other day with the elephants, and I was saying sometimes it's good for them to eat that. It literally hardens them up a little bit. So, you know, if you've got a bad stomach, this can be quite a good leaf that you can feed on or eat, and it just hardens your belly up a little bit. So that was something that we're checking out, and we're going to continue on. We're going down towards the water hole, and we're going to see the impala we're running off, and we're going to see maybe if there's a predator down there. But in the meantime, while we do that and we walk on and see what's down there, let's see what Jamie's got. I think she might have an elephant for you in the Mara.
Elephants that have been spending a great deal of time in this particular area. Now, there's one elephant in particular. He's not here at the moment. I think I can see him all the way back towards the top of the mountain. Now, he is the largest elephant bull that one of the largest elephant bulls that I've seen, and an individual that I've become quite familiar with. Can you see him all the way over there, Craig? Let's just see if it's him. There he is. Big old bull. Long tusks. And he's, I wouldn't call him the leader of this group, but they all gathered around him over the past few days, and he seemed pretty disinterested in enjoying the company of the younger males. And there's a couple of, I say younger males, they're younger than him, but there's a couple of quite large gentlemen here as well. And sometimes he feeds sort of on the fringes of their little group, and then sometimes he wanders off on his own, and that's really a nice demonstration of typical large male elephant behavior. When they reach that sort of 40-year-old mark, they spend a great deal of time solitary, occasionally with one or two what's termed askaris, or sort of loosely termed askaris, which is a group of younger males that keep him company. But this is the first time I've seen this many young males gathered together. Well, there's lots of water after the rain yesterday. Somehow I missed it. But these gentlemen are enjoying the mud and the water that's been around. It's lovely to see a big bachelor group like this. I haven't seen that many of them. Hello, mister. And they're all so well-mannered. Look at that, posing right up against the sunrise for us. Off we go to James in case his bird flies away.
Well, there is a bird that I'm sure many of you have seen, but those of you who do keep bird lists, I'm sure some won't have seen it. It's called a black-winged stilt, and it is not common in these parts. Isn't he pretty? Apparently looking for tadpoles and small aquatic invertebrates. Spiders, tadpoles, fish and amphibian eggs. So partial to caviar, mussels and tadpoles, with the odd fish. Isn't it nice? Those most beautiful pink legs. Oh, and there's a red-breasted swallow flying above the dam, having a drink, having his morning coffee. You got him there, Seb? Coming back now. This is, of course, a huge challenge to try and film.
Plover is a little bit easier.
Yes, you can do the plover. And there is a 3-banded plover. You were talking about the stilt, R. Beard. You say number 150 for you, I think. 107, not 150. You've still got, 43 to get to 150. Well, we'll try and find those. I don't think we'll get them all today. And Vicky, that was number 120 for you. Now, I will tell you while we're sitting here that those lion tracks we had early this morning that we didn't follow seem to be now heading down towards the south where we may have signal. There are people following up on them. So with any luck, we might have some lions to show you a bit later. In addition to the black-winged stilt. Nina, you say this black-winged stilt is number 286 on your Africa list. That is a very impressive return. I wonder how many of those are from here. That would be very interesting to know. And of course many of them will come from the Mara now. Alrighty, I think let's move on. Here we go. Are you ready, Seb?
Yep.
You don't want to spend any more time with the black-winged stilt? No. We might lose signal here, I'm just warning you, and, of course, the terrifying director. Alright, so while we do move on from here, Pyjamas Patterson is still with her elephants. Let's go back across to the Mara.
So we're still with our bachelor herd of elephants, and they've decided to move right away from the road, which is most unfortunate. We've still got a lovely view of them and a beautiful view of the Mara morning. Everything's green and crisp and smells like mud. It's very pretty. Now, looking at these elephant tusks, and I think that it's a very good question because it's something that we notice quite a bit. Now, Lynn, you want to know why are the elephant tusks in the Mara that much more spectacular than they are in South Africa? Is it because there are less trees around? So, it's less to do with the trees and more to do with the quality of the grasses and the number of rainy seasons, I think. Mostly, I think it's a genetic thing, but the fact that they are feeding on grasses for a large portion of the year means that they don't have to rub their tusks down. They're less likely to break them, digging or scraping along trees to pull up the bark. Djuma has a very long and very specific dry season, whereas here in Kenya there's 2 rainy seasons and a very high content partly due to volcanic soils, very high nutrient content and very, very nutritious grasses that grow here. But my theory on that falls down into a lugger almost as deep as the one that I'm next to, because I don't think, personally, that the tusks of the males here are that different to those in South Africa. The females, yes, absolutely. There is a massively noticeable difference between the tusks of the females here and the tusks of the females in South Africa, but I don't notice as large a difference in the males. It gets complex when you try and explain physiological differences between animals in 2 different places that belong to the same species, because there's so many different factors, possibly factors that I haven't even thought to consider. perhaps during time of basically a free-for-all in terms of trophy hunting many decades ago. The larger tusked males were, that genetic line was reduced, perhaps during crisis in terms of poaching. Now, these elephants are very, very safe here now, but there was a time in history when they were exceptionally threatened. So does that make a difference? Maybe that changes the situation with the male elephants. I'm not qualified enough, and I haven't done enough research, and I actually don't know enough in terms of the history and in terms of the evolutionary biology of the male elephants here to actually make that judgment call. It's just a possible theory that I'm putting forward. Genetic differences, I mean, the females really do have noticeably larger tusks. And it makes sense because they're eating different food. Surely, those two thoughts tie together. But correlation does not necessarily equal causation. Maybe it was just that the genetics of the elephants here favored larger tusked females. I'm not sure. So I think it's a tricky question to answer, but I agree with you that the tusks of the female elephants here are definitely larger. The males, I would say, are about the same. That gentleman in the front has got very, very long tusks. Not particularly thick tusks, but very, very long tusks. And of course, each individual elephant is different. That's why you can't judge an age of an elephant by looking at the size of their tusks. It's not going to tell you very much. It's like trying to gauge a human being's hair length as their age, sort of. Okay, that wasn't a very good comparison, but you get the idea. Elephants don't trim their tusks. Sure. Lucian, why did mammoths have such big tusks? Would it not have been to do with food availability and competition? I mean, I'm not 100% sure. Big tusks, I guess, would be useful in terms of males competing with other males, perhaps competing. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. I'm trying to rack my brains as to exactly why mammoths would have had larger tusks than elephants. It's a difficult one. I mean, they were so much larger to begin with. Of course, so many debates about whether or not we should actually try to bring back the mammoth. It would be fascinating, but there's a Jurassic Park quote in there somewhere about so busy seeing whether or not we could, we didn't stop to think if we should, kind of deal. I don't know why mammoths had such big tusks. Competition? I mean, if you look at the factors that combine together in terms of evolution to create a physiological trait, or the physical expression of genetics, they're so complex and so different and partly based on chance. So it might just be that the ones that survived had the biggest tusks. I really don't know. And they weren't that much larger, were they? They weren't that much larger than African elephants. Sorry, I'm just listening. There's a lion roaring. Chitwa airstrip, I think. I don't know. I don't know if anybody out there has read anything about why the tusks of mammoths were so large. I'm open to suggestions. Or perhaps it is just a fluke of nature. Lorna, good question. So you wanted to know if elephants or alligators are the oldest living animals in the wild. Neither, I would say. as far as I know, the sort of the animals that will live, typically mammals are not the longest lived species, so you're not wrong in terms of comparing them to something like an alligator. A crocodile, yes, will live for a very, very long time. Of course, we don't get alligators here, but typically mammals tend not to have as long a life expectancy as something like a reptile or certain reptiles. So tortoises, for example, Galapagos tortoise, although unfortunately using the term wild there is a bit tricky. But I would say that you're looking at a tortoise or a reptile rather than a mammal. So if a Galapagos tortoise can live up to 150, possibly even longer, the land mammals, an elephant is one of the longest living, and it'll live up to about 60, maybe 70 years. Whales, I think, also live for a very, very long time, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't know if there's an explanation to it, but a really large whale, I think they've been recorded living, if I remember correctly, for a good few hundred years. And you could count that as wild, I guess. Lions. Let's go find some lions. Can you hear them roaring at me? They're taunting me. What is the oldest living wild animal? I have a feeling it might be a whale. But reptiles do, as a general rule, large reptiles, like a crocodile, will live longer. Or a tortoise. Go away. Even the leopard tortoises that we see will live potentially the same amount of time as an elephant. While I ponder the mystery of the oldest living animal in the wild, I'm going to try and work out what it might be and see if I've forgotten something. It is early in the morning. Let's go back and join Rolf on his stroll around Djuma.
So we're not with Ralph strolling around Djuma at all. We're with us because Ralph has lost signal, not of course by his own, through his own fault or anything he's done. The oldest living animal, of course, is the Greenland shark, as far as I'm aware. They've found one, I think it was 350 years old, if I'm not mistaken. 350 years ago. And imagine being alive 350 years ago and the things you would have seen change. And how quickly they would have changed in 50 years of your life versus the first 300. I think that's the oldest. Well, no, it's not the oldest living organism. Trees obviously live for thousands of years sometimes. But the oldest living animal. Now we have come towards Treehouse Dam. Reports of large lions heading towards this area. Now whether we can maintain signal for long enough to be able to try and help with the tracking of them, I'm not sure, but we're going to try. We'll stop here and have a look at some birds first. The blacksmith lapwing, inevitably. Ooh, and there's a red-billed quelea. Lapwing. And then there are queleas now just down into the... Which lapwing are we looking at there? Just on the ground there. And see where the guinea fowl are? There's some small birds knocking about there. There's some red-billed queleas. There they are. Isn't that nice? Beautiful little red beaks. Obviously the world's most numerous bird. Remember, there are go-to facts that we like to give you every single time we see certain animals. There's Topi, fastest antelope in the world. There's a quelea, most numerous bird in the world. There's a cheetah, fastest land mammal in the world. Now, I think I have shared with many of you the recipe for guinea fowl. For those that I have not, do it for you again. What you do with the guinea fowl is you pluck it, obviously, once it's dead. You don't pluck it while it's alive. Then you put it in a pot, ideally a steel three-legged pot with a fire underneath it. You put in your vegetables, and you put in your onions and your spices and things like that, and you chop up the guinea fowl and you put it into the water, and in it you also place ideally quartzite rock, and then you let that cook for about 4 days. And when you've finished cooking it for 4 days, you take the lid off, throw out the guinea fowl and eat the rock. And in my opinion, that is the best way to consume guinea fowl, which I think is a fairly foul bird to eat. Yeah. Very stringy. Doesn't taste bad, but they're having a wonderful time drinking their morning water, free of the fear of crocodiles, because there aren't any in here as far as we know. They could, of course, remember that the serrated hinged terrapin, in fact I think most terrapins this is interesting. So that's quite interesting. My phone has decided that it is going to relating to the serrated hinged terrapin. Shut up. I'm not sure what happened there or why it did that. It does that from time to time. The terrapins are not above grabbing birds as they come down to drink. I think the guinea fowl would probably be a little bit larger than they could handle. No, you can't, Robin. You say, can we see the vulturine guinea fowl anywhere near here? No, you cannot. I will show you, if my phone behaves itself, the distribution map for the vulturine guinea fowl. They don't occur in southern Africa. They occur in East Africa, however, and for those of you who don't know what they look like, I will show you. Alright, here is the vulturine guinea fowl. That is the astounding looking vulturine guinea fowl. Isn't that nice? And let's just look at the map. So there you can see it. That is a map of East Africa, basically. So it's found in the northern and far eastern of Kenya. And in fact, it looks like around Mount Kilimanjaro over there in Tanzania. Good. That is the vulturine guinea fowl. Let us continue and try and help with these lion tracks. And I will tell you that the hard-working camera operating department of Djuma has for the last 3 months been conducting a time-lapse experiment. So they come out, GoPro up here and at quarantine clearings for 10 seconds at a time, and for months get a wonderful look at the seasonal changes. We're losing signal. Before we do that, let's just go to Jenny, who has signal.
Sorry about that, everyone. It seems like James has disappeared, but that's okay. We just had something to show you regardless. But before we talk too much about this hippo hiding in the mud, Lorna, I'm so sorry. I completely misunderstood your question, and then Craig actually pointed out to me that the way he'd interpreted it, which is the way that you meant. As far as I know, alligators in their current form have been around longer than elephants have been around on the earth in their current form. As to exact ages, I would have to double check that. I'd have to research for you. But I'm relatively certain things like crocodiles and alligators have been around a bit longer than something like an elephant. There's certain species like a white rhinoceros is one of the most recently evolved species that we see out here, whereas something like an impala has stayed unchanged. Elephants have been around for a bit longer than the white rhino, and black rhino, hook-lipped rhino, has been around much, much longer in its current form than the white rhino. That's what I was going to try and say. I'm sorry, I completely misunderstood what you were asking. Very silly of me. Your interpretation makes a lot more sense than mine did. Back to the hippo, just to show you how terrifyingly still they can be, and how very, very hidden. I actually didn't see it when I drove around. I was driving in the other direction, and just saw it when Craig pointed it out to me. This hippo is 100% alive and well. It's just decided that this muddy wallow is where it wants to be. I don't know if this is the injured hippopotamus that we saw a few days ago. We're close enough that it could be. A few days ago? It was yesterday. Just feels like a few days ago. And imagine being on bushwalk and being caught out by that. The only sign that anything's happening there is the gentle rising and falling of its chest. But scary. This is one of the reasons why, particularly during dry times, one has to be very, very aware of the muddy wallows in an area. And it's one of the reasons also why we don't, first of all, we're not allowed to, and second of all, we would not conduct a bushwalk down in this open area of the Mara, for this exact reason, because if you look around it, there's not that many places to go. So it would be very, very easy to stumble upon it, and very, very difficult to find oneself a safe spot to move away from it. And termite mounds in the Mara, well, let's just say that the South African termite mounds put them slightly to shame. They're much larger. Different species of termite, different requirements of soil, therefore the termite mounds are smaller here. So just a quick thing, I don't want to linger here too long. Those lions are roaring, and I want to get to them before it gets too hot and too late in the day, and they stop roaring. But I don't think that there's anything necessarily wrong with that hippo, by the way, for those of you that might be concerned. It's just lying in the mud. Sometimes they like to do that, especially if they can't find themselves a nice a nice watery area. Okay, no sign of the Angamas. I doubt that's them roaring over there, but let's go and see if we can figure out who's making all that racket. My money's on the marsh breakaway females and potentially the triangle males. So yesterday on the sunset safari, for the first time for me, I had all four of the lion musketeers. Gets a bit confusing. I understand, I'm sorry. Wasn't our choice. Oh, hello, what are you two doing? Remember yesterday Brent was talking about the polygamous nature of bustards, and he had the displaying male Cory bustard. And he said how you often get collections of males all displaying together. This is obviously a very much smaller species of bustard, but if I look at their body language, I would say that there's a part of them that's slightly irritable to find itself in competition with two other males. Let's just sit and watch this play out, because I think we're going to get a bit of calling. Oh, a bit of grooming. Gotta make sure you look your best when there's competition about. Now the display would involve fluffed up feathers and calling. Black-bellied bustards don't display as dramatically as some of the other bird species as part of their family, but I have seen them fighting before. And they kick at each other. It's actually, there's something, it shouldn't be, I concur, but there is something inherently comical about that whole process. Also, whoa, he's given up. He's not having any of it. He's going to go and search for a place where there's no other males hanging about, making him look bad. Alright. Well, that was an anticlimax. Oh, there goes another one. Following or just moving? Oh, here goes another 3. That was not what I was expecting. Such a gentle landing. Alright. Well, so much for that theory. Bye then. Okay, well, it gives us leave to go and search for the lions. Big muddy holes. I have this vague feeling I was talking about something before I got distracted by the bustards. Oh, the musketeers, right. So, for viewers who are desperately confused by this whole thing, there are cheetah musketeers, there are 5 of them. They live over there, across the river. There are lion musketeers, there are 4 of them, and they live over here, on this side of the river. There are also cheetah musketeers in Botswana, and probably I think you'll find musketeer coalitions pretty much all over Africa, whether they are cheetah or lions. It seems to be a very popular choice as a name. I was with the musketeer male lions yesterday. It was the first time I'd seen all 4 of them together. And their territory sits adjacent to that of the Triangle Boys. The Triangle Boys are around here. They're also known as the Chitwa males. Actually, their official name is the Chitwa males. I've got it into my head that they're the Triangle males, but they are the Chitwa males. So their territory is adjacent, and then across the river over there, the young upstarts in the form of the Bilashaka males, the 6 young males. They spend a lot of time over there, and I know that Brent found 3 of them yesterday. He said he wasn't sure where the other 3 were. It's possible with big coalitions that they could split, which would change the ultimate outcome of where they end up. Okay. As I go off in search of our roaring lions, I'm not sure whether any of you heard any lions roaring on the dam camera last night. I know they've been hiding away from the guys on Djuma, but let's go and see what Ralph is searching for on foot.
I was saying earlier, we're always looking to see what are the tracks and signs. Now, we had a look at some of the tracks that I showed you a little bit earlier, but now we start to look at a little bit of the other signs that start to present themselves and show us what has been around. Now, if you have a look at this, what I've got in my hand here, seems pretty nondescript. If we break it open a little bit, it's very fine, sort of vegetable matter, okay? It turns almost into a powder. So when we look at this kind of dung, we would obviously think that this is, when we talk about herbivores, there's generally the 2 groups, which is the hindgut fermenters or the ruminants. Now, when they're in these little balls like this, it's generally the ruminants, because they've got the 4-chambered stomachs, and what they do is they will bite off the grass or the leaves, and then they chew it, they swallow it, it goes into that first chamber, they regurgitate it again, and then they chew it and they swallow it again, and they can pass this through many times before it actually continues through the whole system and goes out the back end. But this now, very fine. So definitely one of the ruminants. So we can already eliminate all of the hindgut fermenters, which are your warthog, your rhinoceros, your hippo, your elephant. And then we start to look at the size and shape of the dung itself, and then we start getting closer to our answer. So in this kind of situation here. Impala, they're generally a lot smaller. When we think of giraffe dung, theirs is almost the size of an oriole. It's almost the same size and shape as an oriole, whereas these, they're more like a rugby ball type shape, or an American football type shape, and getting closer to more like that of a kudu. Okay, we don't see any tracks here. This is relatively old dung, so it's difficult to see that there's any tracks around. It would have been rained on. It's moved along. But we can definitely say, just by seeing this, that there's definitely kudu in this area. Now, if we move just a little bit backwards over there, I've got some other dung that I'd like to show you, and this is obviously quite different in the shape and texture. Okay, but now what is quite fascinating here is that this animal, being a kudu, is way bigger than this animal. Okay, well, the animal that produced this. However, this animal has got a totally different kind of digestive system. And as you saw with the kudu dung, when I broke that open, you saw that it was very fine. If I break this open, and folks, really, we're not concerned with dung, breaking it open and handling it. It doesn't really hold much bacteria or anything, so it won't make us sick. We don't generally need to even wash our hands. If we are handling anything that is a meat-eating scat, and that is quite dangerous. That holds quite a lot of bacteria, and we don't want to be handling that without washing our hands afterwards, immediately afterwards, because it can be quite dangerous. But don't worry, with me handling this, I can still drink my water and whatnot. I will not get sick. But let's have a look on the inside of the dung here. You can see that this is really not digested well at all. There's still whole pieces of grass in here. And you can actually see the different little particles and things. Look at that. That's a whole piece of grass that's passed right through. There's another whole piece of grass. So this definitely being that of a hindgut fermenter, it hasn't been chewed many times. This has been chewed once and swallowed and then passed through the fermentation process of a hindgut fermenter. And the shape of this would lead us to think that it's either one of two animals. It's either a zebra being also a hindgut fermenter, like horses or donkeys, but with this dung, it's a slightly more rounded shape, where if you look at zebra or horses, it's quite kidney shaped. Now, this dung is that of a warthog. So look at the difference, eh? That tiny small little dung pellet over there, as opposed to the dung ball of the warthog. So, and this animal being way bigger than this animal, is about 10 times bigger, but with a totally different digestive system. So that's how we track and we see what different kinds of animals are moving around. We're using all the different kinds of signs, and we usually eliminate as we go along. So right now I can tell you that there are warthog here and there are kudu, even if I didn't see them for myself. So while we continue, I'm going to look for other tracks and signs, but I think somebody's got a nice crested barbet to show you.
The crested barbet unfortunately died of old age while we were waiting to see it, so unfortunately we don't have it, but we do have another interesting bird. Seb, straight in front of us there is a tree. Right, in that picture, the one on the left-hand side, in the middle of the picture, sorry. Yep, that's it. Then up a bit. Oh, it's gone. There was a bird. Oh, no, it's still there. There we are. Well spotted. That is a dusky flycatcher. I don't think it has a new name. Well, it certainly isn't a new name anymore. They've been new for about 17 years. Let me just show you a picture of it. The lion tracks have headed west from this point, where we will not have any signal. And I think, well, Rexon is following up on them, and I think you're going to find that they've crossed into Aratuza. In which case, well, there's nothing we can do. He's this fellow over here, I think. Not, sorry, that fellow there. the dusky flycatcher. I think. Quite difficult to tell quite often, but I think that's him. Marvellous. Not a particularly inspiring bird. I mean, it's not exactly like the hyacinth macaw, but still. He has a right to life just like the rest of us. Lucian, you obviously weren't with us when we were at Treehouse Dam earlier. You say, what kind of bird is the most numerous bird in the world? The most numerous bird in the world, other than the domestic chicken, which could be the most numerous bird in the world, is in fact the red-billed quillia. There are many red-billed quillias in the world, hundreds of millions of them. I don't know how many domestic chickens there are. I think I mean, as far as I'm aware, there are well over a few billion domestic chickens about the place. So I think that they are the most numerous bird in the world. Oh. Okay. The lions have been found. They are on a boundary. They are static. In other words, they're not moving. So we're going to try and go there, but I have a horrible feeling we're not going to have any signal. Rex, I'm on my way. I just don't think we're going to the Nkahuma Pride, everybody. Oh, hang on a second. Alright, let's go across to Jamie while I find out what's going on here and get some news from her.
So we're on our way. I mean, as James races to his lions, we're racing in the direction of where I heard the lions roaring. Well, we found ourselves, well, a little bit earlier in an elephant roadblock. And this particular male decided he didn't want us to come past. Now, I'm not into must or coming out of must. So he was looking at us with that side eye that suggested he wanted to come and intimidate us, which male elephants do regardless of whether or not they're in must, but they do occasionally, or they do it more frequently when they are. So must, for our new viewers, is essentially a phase that elephants go through, male elephants go through, once they reach sexual maturity regularly. And essentially it is a massive increase in testosterone. They dribble constantly from their temporal glands as well as urinating, dribbling urine almost constantly as well. And an elephant in must has a very, very distinctive smell. And during that time, you can imagine with those increased testosterone levels, they can often be slightly more unpredictable. And they have one thing or a couple of things on their minds. One is finding a nice female elephant to mate with, and the females will show preference for an elephant bull in must. Although there's a part of me that wonders whether or not that's just due to behavior as well. A must bull is more likely to be pushy and therefore more likely to mate with a receptive female. They also want to fight everything. They get a very distinctive swagger, and their ears are usually held during must. They usually hold their body posture slightly differently, with their heads up and their ears just above the top of the shoulders. And during that time, the temporal gland actually swells up, and I sometimes wonder whether it's not uncomfortable for them at the height of must. When it's all swollen and sore, I imagine that it must actually be a little bit discomforting. Might also contribute to a slightly bad mood. But this is where individual characteristics come in as well, because I have met many a bull elephant in must that is perfectly calm, perfectly relaxed, and perfectly well behaved. We just tend to watch them slightly more closely if we see those sorts of signs. But if he is in must, it's either very, very early on or very, very late stage. I'm inclined to say early, because the whitish greenish stains that they get on the back of their legs, I can't see any sign of that. Nothing there. So I think if he is going into must, it's very early. Or he might just be feeling cheeky, which is possible. Hey, mister, but you've calmed down nicely. Okay, I'm going to leave him. I would like to stay and enjoy some more time in his company. Yeah, now you're well behaved. But I want to get to these lions as quickly as possible. It's somewhere here. I can see cars moving in that direction. And if it is the three marsh breakaway lionesses, Jicho, Kini and Akili, then they should have cubs with them, which would be very, very exciting. The last time I saw those cubs, they were playing with a game drive blanket. It was very entertaining. It was the best possible toy they could have acquired. Who knows how they acquired it? I think it washed down during the big rains. But it could have fallen off a vehicle as well, although I don't think there's many lodges that use dog blankets except for us. Dog blankets as guest blankets. There's something I wanted to say, actually, thinking about elephant tusks. We know for a fact that hunting and poaching, particularly poaching because it's done without any degree of control, have essentially reduced over time. The average tusk size of elephants throughout Africa has been decreased for that reason. We, as human beings, as a species, have artificially reduced the tusk size. Obviously not myself and Craig personally, but human beings as a whole have, on average, reduced the elephant tusk size and actually also favored tuskless elephant genetics due to poaching and hunting as well. So I'm merely comparing that conversation we were having earlier is specifically comparing male elephants in the Mara to male elephants in South Africa versus female elephants in the Mara and female elephants in South Africa. I just thought maybe I needed to clarify that because I don't think it came across very clearly. Okay. Kathy. Now I shouldn't be the one to answer this. I will answer it and then I'll ask for Craig's opinion. So Kathy is wondering about which time of day the light is at its most beautiful. I would standard answer, first thing in the morning and in the afternoon. That as the sun dips low and the light becomes golden. And it becomes a lot more difficult when the sun is high, particularly in the Mara, of course, because the sun is very, very harsh and the light becomes very white and very, very harsh. Craig, agree? Yeah? Craig agrees. Could you choose between morning and afternoon? On the... yeah. Yep, exactly. So Craig says they both morning and afternoon have their advantages. Depends on what you're doing, where you want the position of the sun, and of course it'll depend on the clouds as well. There's nothing more flat than a cloudy sunrise or a cloudy sunset. It's pretty average. But it's one of the things that we often talk about, and I am not a cameraman by any stretch of the imagination. You've seen my pictures. I have to take them through my phone and my binoculars. But, I have often when we're shooting Safari Live stories after or between the drives, we try and get it done as quickly as possible before the light gets harsh. Otherwise, we have to bring out that blinding, what do you call it? The reflector board. We have to bring out the blinding reflector. And I struggle, I really do. I don't know if it's a pale eye thing or pale, I don't know. But I really struggle. Safari Live stories with me squinting into the camera, trying to find where the camera is. Totally useless where that's concerned. As we search for our lions, the marvelous news is that James has found his way back into good signal. Let's go and see whether he's had any luck with his search for the big cats.
We just had a wonderful sighting, everybody, of the Nkuhuma Pride, all 6 cubs, male lion. They've killed something, I don't know what it is. They seem to have finished eating it. Unfortunately, there was no signal there. They are going on to Arathusa. They were on the boundary there. Hopefully that situation will be rectified fairly soon. Anyway, just to tell you that there are lions around. We managed to see them. Rexton managed to track them down, which was good. So now we'll go somewhere else, I suppose. I think we might go down towards Chitwa and see what's happening there at the water as the morning starts to warm up. I will tell you that it's remained relatively cool, actually. This breeze that's blowing carries with it the tongues of Kuth, and perhaps we will have a bit more of a frontal rain fairly soon. I said that yesterday, of course, and we did not.